Welcome to the first 2024 episode of First Principles. Though we're only 15 months old, we're also technically into our third calendar year after our first episode in August 2022. So, a happy new year to all of you. And here's to many, many more years of wonderful conversations and learning and growing. My guest today is Viren Shetty, the Executive Vice Chairman of Narayana Health, the publicly listed healthcare group that operates over 24 hospitals across India. And refreshingly, Viren thinks about healthcare as an assembly line. And there are many, many steps in this line. Many of these are very small. They seem unimportant, even forgettable, like scheduling an annual healthcare checkup, or filling out a feedback form at your clinic, or just waiting in line for your doctor's appointment. So, when I asked Viren about how healthcare in India can be fixed, he pointed to this assembly line. Basically, what if you tweaked every small step of this line a little bit? Small, unnoticeable changes at every step? He's confident that the result will be a smooth, well oiled machine that takes care of your health end to end. This is what Viren says Narayana Health is trying to do. It reminded me of Apple actually. Take existing technologies, make improvements while putting the user at the center of the experience. Let me give you some context. Narayana Health is a name I'm sure you've heard, especially if you're from Bangalore. It was founded in 2000 by Dr. Viren Shetty and went public in 2016, valued at over $1 billion. But what we know as Narayana Health today began as Narayana Hrudayalaya, a super specialty hospital with a laser sharp focus on cardiac health. 20 years on, it's changed a lot. In addition to its numerous hospitals across India, Narayana Health is also venturing into its own health insurance policies, partnering with clinics and pharmacies, and building an ambitious bundled subscription plan for its customers. This episode is a first in more ways than one. It's not just our first episode of 2024, it's also the first episode with a guest from the healthcare sector. And it's the first episode which may sound a little different to you. For this episode, the first part of our conversation with Viren, we dive headfirst into the healthcare landscape in India. I ask about health in India at large. Why are health checkups such a hassle? Is the answer to better healthcare in hardware or software? What are the health tech startups doing right? And then there is the unshakable mistrust that the Indian population holds against hospitals and doctors, largely. Can this even be solved? Patiently and confidently, Viren answers every one of my questions. He talks about building sticky habits in customers, changing the messaging in healthcare, and why becoming worse as an insurance company is the key, possibly, to becoming better as a healthcare company. In this episode, we truly get down to the first principles of healthcare in India. It's a masterclass, really. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Let's begin. Viren, let's just start with what you were reminding me just now. What was it, 2019?
Yeah.
And we were having a conversation about podcasts.
About many things in life, about, business, journalism. And I said, hey, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Have you guys ever thought about it? And I seem to recall you telling me, no, the Ken is this very unique one story a day. It's something that's heavily researched. We're going to stick with the medium that we know.
We continue to be that. By the way.
And then I remember showing you all the podcasts I was listening to at the time. I said, you guys should totally do this. It's going to be amazing. And you didn't seem that enthusiastic about the time, but I'm so glad here we are sitting down. And
yeah, I'm glad as well. Different time, different place. Thank you for reminding me. I'd honestly forgotten about that. And my apologies. It's it's often it happens that sometimes people who are not part of your company or sector are able to see a trend more clearly than you are inside. Um Maybe it's that, maybe it was the fact that sometimes organizations take their own time to get to a place where you need to be confident that you'll be able to execute on an idea that someone else had given as well. So thank you. I'm glad that we started podcasts. I'm having fun doing them, and the circle is now
Yeah.
closed because we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
So,
And
welcome to First Principles, Viren. Glad to have you here.
thank you. Glad to be here.
So, I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because we've spoken many times about what ails healthcare and how to improve healthcare. And I think you're one of the few healthcare executives that I've spoken with who's so passionate about the healthcare experience, and who feels rightly that unless you fix the healthcare experience, we're always just going to be like uh, potentially playing with a fragment of the overall market or needs that a consumer may have. We'll get into that. You're vice chairman of Narayana Health. That's correct, right?
Yep.
First question: what is Narayana Health today? I know you guys are a listed organization. You listed in 2016, but when you started, and of course, those of us who are in Bangalore know Narayana Health very closely because the very first hospital, Narayana Hrudayalaya, is kind of part of Bangalore lore. But what is Narayana Health today as an organization compared to what it started?
So the organization was started by my dad with just one heart hospital in Bangalore, one in Calcutta, just doing cardiac. And it had to evolve into many different avatars over the years to respond to what he perceived very rightly back then, that there is this massive demand for healthcare, not enough places where you can get it, and this huge trust deficit. There was a point at which you could have said that our business is the business of providing surgeries at the lowest possible price to whoever needed a surgery. But the problem with that is, one, you are constraining yourself to a very narrow segment of the market. Not surgeries as a percentage of total healthcare spend, but people who know that they need surgeries, which is very, very small. And you don't get to call yourself a healthcare company if you're dealing with people who know they have a problem, who are literally at death's door, clutching their heart, coming to you and saying, "Oh, doc, do something for me right now because I need that." And so we realize if we are a healthcare company, we need to deal with people's health. And people's health is many years before the heart attack, many years before the cancer nodule, many years before any metabolic issue that you have. What we want to become, we're not there yet. The thing that we want to become known as is a integrated healthcare company. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you think health, you have to think about us. Right now, if only think of death is when you think of a hospital. That's it. Like at the point of death or relatively close to it is when you think of a hospital. But by then it's too late. It is very expensive. It is very complicated. It's very difficult. The recovery period is insane. And nobody's happy with that experience. Nobody saves up and looks forward to spending lakhs of rupees in a hospital. It's not something that is analogous to, I save up and buy a car or your apartment or an iPhone. It's not a pleasurable experience. It's not something you plan for. And so as much as we say we're going to make ourselves this place where you get surgeries done at the lowest price, you take something that cost 4 lakh rupees, you make it 2 lakh rupees, it's still 2 lakh rupees the person is not happy to spend. You can make it 200 rupees, they will still not be happy about it.
And also they've managed to only avoid something, not gain something. So by getting a surgery, you're probably avoiding further complications or avoiding deaths or something else. So therefore that's not pleasurable, right? Like, I mean, to your point earlier, pleasure is something when I gain something back, which is more meaningful to me.
Yeah. And it does. I mean, to be fair, surgeries does give you years back to your life and so on, but you're irrevocably altered from that state of your body. You are never quite the same. You have some condition, you have some scarring. So it's not a happy experience. But prevention, say ounce of prevention, pound of cure, the ability to live your best life, to be your best self, to be able to do the things that prevent these occurrences down the road, that's something we want to democratize the ability of people to do that much more preemptively rather than something that is forced in an annual corporate healthcare checkup or these things that the insurance companies make you do where you need, just before you sign up, you need to do a physical, or something that's driven by a huge amount of societal pressure saying, no, you've turned 40, you have to get this scan, you have to get this checkup done. No, it has to be pleasurable. It has to be something that you look forward to, and it has to be something that you turn into a pleasurable activity, the state of your health. It should be a source of great joy for you to know your biological age versus knowing your actual age. It should be something that people should be proud about. There is this tech entrepreneur in the US right now whose name I can't immediately recall, who has committed millions of dollars to the idea that he's going to extend his life to be his best self till he's 100. And he gets all kinds of tests done. He takes a ton of supplements. He measures every single gram of food that he eats. And maybe that's an extreme. But there is a version of that that is a lot simpler that most people do, and that can be turned into something that is sold as a service to people who want to live long. And so for us, where we are today as a company is moving towards a place where people come to us well before they're sick, well before they need the surgery, where we say, look, I will take care of your health for you. I will make sure that you live to a ripe old age without any major issues. And should that major issue happen, we're obviously going to take care of it. So we want to flip the equation to one where we're there only when you really need us, to one when we're there all the time, along with when you really need us.
Multiple thoughts came to my mind while you were speaking, very interesting points that you made. The first thing that you said, and I kind of agree with you, is that if you look at, let's say, for instance, health checkups, right? Two of the examples that you gave, corporate health checkups or insurance provided health checkups. What's common to both of them for me is the fact that you're not paying for the health checkup, and therefore it's something that most of us don't like doing. So it's like, hey, I'll do it if my company is paying for it, or I'll do it if my insurers are either asking me to do it or paying for it. And I think that strikes at the heart of the problem that you mentioned, right? Like, if you don't want to pay for something, it's never going to be something that you look forward to. So it's, in many ways, it's like a chicken and egg, right? Are you talking about designing a healthcare / wellness experience that people will look forward to spending money on their own money as well, right? Because that's the gold standard. If I look forward to something, if I desire something, why would I not want to spend a decent bit of money? And I'm sure it's not like you use the example like a car or home and iPhone. A health checkup will be a fraction of any of these, and yet we don't do it.
Yep. We honestly don't have the answer to that. What the situation we described, where people proactively come to us and say, this is a thing that I'm happy to spend, a few thousands of rupees on versus then lakhs of rupees at some point in the future, that doesn't exist today. So we're trying to work within the constraints of what already exists. People buying insurance exists. People going for annual health checkups exist. People going to a hospital exist. People consulting with the doctor online exist. And people delivering medicines online also exist. Now it's up to us to take all these things which today are provided by a different set of people, each with their own incentives, to maximize their own individual portion of the pie and turn it into one fully integrated offering. And so our idea is not to be the best or the largest insurance company, not to be the largest medicine delivery company, not to be the best online health advice giving company, but to combine all of that into one offering that is able to look at the patient as the center and take that as the core, and then use that to offer all the services that they require before they've asked for requiring it. So a person who we know is in their 50s, has a family history of heart disease, has aging parents, there are a certain list of services and certain list of medicines we know they require, and all of that we would bundle and provide for them in the way that would most suit their needs, combined with some insurance, because we know they have to pay for that anyway, so they might as well get it from us. And so the idea is that we start from this point where we take elements of what already exists, combine it into an integrated offering, and iterate on it and build it so that eventually we get to a point where people are able to come proactively, even without us saying that it's actually insurance combined with medicine, combined with doctor services, combined with hospital, and say that, look, this is a thing that will lead me to a better outcome for my family. And so I will just pay for the whole thing at once.
Are you a fan of Apple?
Huge fan.
Okay. So the reason I ask you is because while you were speaking about we're not going to be the best at A, B, C, D, E, but when you combine it and you put the user at the center of it, we want to be the best at that. In many ways, it takes me back to the launch of the iPhone, where before the iPhone came, no one could say, the iPhone invented the capacitive touch screen. No one could say the iPhone invented having a, type a keyboard on the screen, or that the iPhone invented even apps for that matter. But what the iPhone did was it integrated all of them into the same device and made the user and the user experience the central forcing function. And of course, today, it's not just enough that Apple derives a significant percentage of its revenue from services and from subscriptions. I pay a monthly subscription to Apple for the Apple One family subscription as well. So, pardon me for this, I'm also a huge fan of analogies, but it looks to me that you're trying to build an iPhone equivalent in the healthcare space, which effectively becomes a subscription play as well. Is that far off the mark from what you're trying to do? Is my analogy broadly in the park?
It's a really flattering comparison. Anyone who can compare us to Apple and to say that we can achieve even a bit of what they've done, that is a gold standard for any company to achieve. But we're directionally right in the sense that there are a complementary set of services that hospitals all provide, which today happen as a set of very discrete purchases. Someone comes, buys medicines, goes home. Someone comes, gets a checkup, goes home. Someone comes, sees a doctor, goes home. Someone comes, gets a surgery, stays for a bit, then goes home. And one is not connected to the other. You may go to very different providers for all of those. You mean the doctor you see may be near your house. The pharmacy you go to may be somewhere down the road. The hospital you go to may be very far from where you are. None of their systems talk to one another. None of these events are correlated in the sense that it's only coordinated at the time when you get there. So the doctor goes through your history and is able to say, okay, these are the things you're taking, and so I will keep that in mind. So we want to turn healthcare from a series of very discrete events to one that's operating in a fully coordinated fashion. And that's not easy. It's not currently how people think about how healthcare should work. And there's always a problem when companies try to go a little too far ahead of where their customers are, where the current mindset is, what they're used to purchasing. And so you don't want to live in the year 2100 when we're still in 2023. And so for us, it will be take enough elements of what people are comfortable with while slowly nudging them in the direction of this future where we want. So right now, we're applying for a health insurance license. Health insurance is something that is a good, it's a gateway to people getting into a...
Have you got it? Because sorry to interrupt you, but I thought I read a news article a couple of days ago, or maybe last week, about Narayana Health's health insurance license having come through, or was it something else?
It's nearly there. So with all things in the regulated space, there are many stages. Yeah. There's round 1, round 2, round 3. So we're through a few of those rounds, a couple more rounds left.
All right, please continue. So you're saying part 1 was your health insurance play. So effectively, I could, as a consumer, buy a health insurance policy from Narayana Health as well.
Yes.
At some point.
And at some point next year. And bundled with that would be the set of all these services that are layered on top. And so since I already have, let's say, a credit card or your payment details on file, and then we already have that relationship with you, and we have a reason to call you and say, please get this test done, please get this scan done, please see this doctor, then we would say, see, now we've identified you belong to this certain risk cohort, which would imply that you may be on this certain medication or you could benefit from this much counseling and testing. So with these little add-on packs you would take to that, it's your option completely, because people
So
still...
is this a subscription based offering?
That would be the idea. The idea is that you have the insurance and we have subscription offerings bundled on top of it, which will combine all these services together.
And what's the synergy between? So because you're doing this, do you also feel that you are going to be more competitive on the insurance side because you have better visibility into your consumers' health as well?
While we would hope to be, the initial couple of years in that would probably not, because the best insurance companies write as many policies as possible and then try and either not, or just cross their fingers and pray and hope that their customers don't end up showing up in a hospital for claims, or if they do, find a way to deny as much of those claims as possible. I'm not having any particular I'm not throwing any particular shade at one company and the other. This is a universal practice for standalone health insurance companies throughout the world. But ours, by design, will be worse as a health insurance company, because we are taking that much more visibility and that much more effort into understanding a person's true health and their medical history, which means we will actually be making them do a lot more healthcare than would otherwise be the case if you have this policy but you're not really claiming it. Because in the end, we want people to be healthier. We want people to develop a sticky habit. And our hope is that if we can keep these people healthy over their lifetime, in the long enough run time frame, then they'll be able to, at least we can recover how much is spent.
What will it take for any organization to succeed in such an ambitious play? Not just you, but anyone else. Because, and the subtext there is, now I speak again as a consumer, is I think the lack of trust and incentives, as not just consumers or patients in India, but all around the world. We've got decades of history of hospitals, doctors. Again, I'm not throwing shade at any one particular hospital or doctor, but of wrong incentives, wrong prescriptions, over medication, over prescription of interventions, etc. So there is one of the reasons why, possibly, why consumers don't trust hospitals with their wellness is because we've always got this thing that, oh, they're just going to, I went in, the most common thing you ask anyone is, I went in for X and they got me to do, A, B, and C as well. Right? Now, it doesn't matter whether the hospital or the doctor was right in prescribing it. It only matters that the patients think that, they were just gypped every time they went to a hospital. So that breakdown of trust and incentives, where you or any other hospital has an incentive to prescribe more tests, has an incentive to intervene because that's where the money lies, at some level must change, right? Because only then will consumers start trusting you, saying that, oh, you're not just recommending these because you want to make more money from me, but because you genuinely want me to stay healthy over the long run. What would it take for that to happen?
See, but going back to what you said earlier about the incentives driving the behavior, and that's true. I mean, that's true of any industry. A healthcare model built on fee for service, where the more you do, the more you get paid for, would sometimes lead to that abuse. But let me go beyond that. See, the truth is that every doctor has a long, long career. No one wants to be known as someone that has unnecessary procedures, because that reputation will catch up to you. So by and large, you can trust that your doctor is not driven entirely by a profit motivation. They're driven by your good outcomes, because you have a good outcome, you have a good health, you go out, you will tell 10 people about what a great experience you had, and that's further business.
And
for
word
the
of
doctor.
mouth is the most common way
Exactly.
doctors acquire more customers.
But it still won't shake away the impression that any customer will have going to a hospital. Let me put it this way. Let's say someone comes in they have some amount of blockage in their arteries. So a very old school traditional doctor will say, oh, you'll be fine. Diet, medicine, exercise, you'll be fine.
You're implying that they will not want to intervene and put a stent immediately.
They will not want to put a stent at all. An older doctor will say, look, I've seen so many cases like this. You can manage it with diet and exercise. You'll be fine. And that doctor will be right. There may be someone who may be a little on the middle, or let's say, on the middle end of his career. They will look and say, okay, I've seen people like you day in and day out. You're not going to diet. You're not going to be adherent to your medication. You're 100% not going to exercise. Your lifestyle is going to be as poor as it was. That's causing these arteries to be blocked. So, stent. Right? And that doctor will also be right.
Interestingly, that doctor is more aware of the psyche of the patient.
Yep.
All right.
And another doctor who may be a little more young, a little more aggressive, it could be a surgeon, he will look at it and say, look, I don't trust you with the stent either, because even with the stent, you're going to need to be on certain kinds of medication and blood thinners and so on. I know you're not going to do that because I've seen people like you day in and day out. I'm going to propose heart surgery, the most expensive of the lot, but the one that provides the longest term fix. And that person will also be right. The truth is, you don't know, because everyone is treating this episodically. Like, I see you once, I'm not going to see you again. Or if I see you again, it may be only a couple of years from then. I'm not that involved in your life. I'm not that involved in your stress levels. I'm not that involved in your mental makeup. Or I'm not, going through your diet chart as a surgeon or a cardiologist. You just don't have the time to get into all of that. And so for us, the hope is that the incentives get...
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you here, because again, you bring up something very important, which is the point that you make is it's episodic. So in the sense that you go to these three, let's say it's the same person going to three different doctors, because what usually happens is with something like this, people tend to get different opinions, right? And I'm sure it's incredibly frustrating for doctors as well when people are second guessing them, but it happens. So they go to three different doctors. Now, like you said, each of the doctors has no incentive or has no visibility into the longer term patterns of that patient, right? Similarly, the patient also has no longer term exposure or trust or relationship with either of these three doctors. So it is episodic on both sides.
Yep.
It's transactional on both sides. And what you're trying to solve for through this, I think, integrated subscription play is that let's not make it episodic. Let's make sure that you keep coming back, and there is a history of checkups, of consultations, of prescriptions, of diet advice, where we can look back and say, hey, here's 2 years, 3 years worth of this thing. This is what we know. Basis this is what we recommend. That's what you're trying to do. Change it from episodic on both sides to relationship driven.
And on top of that, tie our own hands as well, because as the provider and the insurance entity, we get paid the same amount, whether it is the surgery or the stent or the medicine. And so in the end, what are we most incentivized by? Having the patient live as long as possible. Have the person live their best life and have as good an experience, so they keep coming back to us to say, look, I trust you for this 1 year for taking care of my health. You did a damn good job. I'm going to keep paying you, and you keep taking care of my health. And so that aligns us over much longer periods of time. And so it forces us into doing things that are ultimately for the long-term benefit of these patients. And this model is not new. The fact is, these things exist in most parts of the world. So if you take the UK, the NHS sort of operates like that, where there is no financial transaction, there is no episodic nature. You have GPs, and the GPs are the ones who are responsible for referring you to specialists should the need arise. But more often than not, they can take care of it at their level.
I was going to come to because a lot of what you said about having an ongoing relationship with a healthcare provider used to be with the GPs. And where, like, at least growing up, we used to go to the same doctor for virtually all illnesses. And then at some point, if something else happens, the doctor would refer us. Now, as we all know, I think by and large, at least in urban India, the concept of GPs where you go on a regular basis has gone. It has been disrupted and replaced by either clinic chains or by hospitals. So, what you're also saying is that it's no longer possible to have that ongoing relationship with one GP, but it's going to be with a hospital group or a healthcare group. Now, when you want to do that, the things that you're trying to do, others also have access to it, right? You're applying for a health insurance license. I'm sure others are or might. You have lots of hospitals, you have lots of doctors. There are other groups as big or even larger. Uh, what is it that will differentiate Narayana Health or the group which is successful at it versus the others? Because it's not going to be access to capital, access to any of these individual items, because anyone could get this. So what will differentiate the successful from the ones who aren't?
That's a good question. See, our business, the services based industry, it doesn't have a lot of moats. Like anyone could take the elements of what we have and put it together, and you could basically recreate the same thing. It'll take a lot of time, it will take a lot of money. And so every other major hospital group has run insurance companies in the past. But I think the thing that we're doing different that hasn't been done before is to run it under one common entity. And so it is the same company, that's NH, that owns the insurance company, that runs the clinics, that runs the pharmacies, that will get into the insurance, that will run the online portal. And so the hope is that at least with a common enough set of owners, there is an incentive for at least one small group of very motivated individuals to make sure that the constituent portions of this, this melange of different providers are working with a common directive. Because there is every incentive in the end for someone who's selling the insurance to sell as many policies as possible. So let's say we're starting out just in Bangalore city. We won't even be able to start out in all of Bangalore city. We are in the southern part of Bangalore. So the first set of policies will have to be sold in South Bangalore. But let's say an overzealous insurance salesman says, there's a lot of demand in North Bangalore as well. A lot of people are staying there. But we would not be able to service them. To which the insurance company say, great, because then no claims will come. But we say, no, we want people to be happy. We want people to be using the services. What's most important is stickiness. If someone pays for something and doesn't use it, two things are guaranteed to happen. One is they're not going to resubscribe again. The second thing is they're going to say, this is a complete waste of my time and money. And that is something that can kill a business over a long enough time frame. So I would say that what we would bring, I won't say that what makes us special, but at least what we will try to bring in is a sense of keeping enough trust in customers and trust in our patients to say that this is something they see a lot of value in, and it's something that I keep using, and there's a stickiness built into it. And so I will keep coming again and again and again. And if we have to lose money in doing it, we will continue to do so. But over the long enough time frame, this is something that should ultimately make sense.
I want to talk about health checkups as well. We've spoken about it in the past, and we started the conversation today with that. And it's something that is not a pleasurable experience. Why is that so? And how can it be changed? And I'll explain the context, right? The context of most health checkups is, and the reason why people don't do it is either because it's expensive, right? It costs 5,000, 10,000 rupees. The older you get, the more expensive it gets. Or, and then here's the interesting part, right? As you get older, you can afford to spend that more money on a health checkup. What you can't probably afford to spend is that half day, or maybe better part of a day that you'll spend shuffling around from one desk to the other in a hospital where you're not exactly the most important customer for that hospital that day, right? Patients are. You're not a patient. You're just a person getting some check done. Now you go to and sit there and etc. So it's an experience which is completely broken. How are you looking at the health check? By the way, there's an exception. We've spoken about that. There is this organization in Bangalore called Noora.ai, which has tried to solve it by redesigning the experience where you're in and out in a couple of hours. But I think it's far too small and niche and expensive for it to disrupt the wider market. How are you thinking about it, especially given your integrated play?
The entire checkup experience that includes the cardiac scan, that includes the blood test, that includes the evaluation, can be done in an hour. It can be done in less than an hour, but let's take an hour. Just in and out, you walk in, an hour later, you're out, and everything is done online, and it's, you pay later, the reports are given to you on email. It can be done in an hour. But why it is not done is because it is integrated too much into the day-to-day running of a hospital. Now, the equipment that you need is extraordinarily expensive. The thing most people don't appreciate is that when you're getting the highest standards of care in India, the machines we buy are nothing less than what you get in Europe or the US. It is the same machine. It doesn't cost any less for an MRI or a CT scan to be sold in India than it does in the US.
Just out of curiosity, and in a ballpark, a top of the end or like a latest MRI machine costs in what ballpark?
I mean, the absolute highest end, you're looking anywhere from 15 to 20 crores, but generally from 8 to 12 crores.
So
for
it's
most
like
of
$1
these.
million to $2 million.
$2 million for all of these. And you're paying dollars. I mean, there's no special rupee. You're paying in dollars for all of this. It's the same price.
And thus, your point being that when you buy such an expensive asset, it is constantly, every minute of its utilization goes and counts.
Because the machine lasts for, maybe if you really take really good care of it, 15 years, but under Indian conditions, with not just the climate, humidity, and the pollution and so on, but the fact that we really use these machines, we're utilizing them well beyond the kind of volumes that they're used to dealing with. It will last for maybe half that. And also there is a lot of obsolescence built into this because the technology is constantly evolving. Just like you have your iPhone 14 and 15s, you have different, there's different gradations for how thin a CT slice can be. The MRI will have different ability to penetrate different sorts of tissue. There are a lot of software upgrades. So even 5-6 years, you're going to want the next machine. And so in a very short period of time, you need to process mad volume through these machines. And so what that means is you only get that in a hospital. Now, the bet we are making is that by building these dedicated screening centers in strategic parts throughout Bangalore, and by promising that, one, the price will be very affordable and it can be done in 1 hour, we will be able to get enough volume, almost like a drive-through, pick up something and go experience. And that's the theory. That's something we'll spend a fair bit of money in trying to get done. But it will address the irritation of getting health checkup done. It will not address the core issue that lies behind every single person's hesitation for getting the checkup done, which is something fundamental to human psychology, that if there's something bad,
I'd rather not know it.
I don't want to know about it. I just don't. My grandparents died in their 60s. My parents had a heart attack whenever they did. Statistically, I'm as likely to suffer from the same conditions that they did. But if you don't tell me, I don't need to think about it. If I don't need to think about it, I'll deal with it when it happens. And the diet and lifestyle being the way it is, it's something that it's always lurking at the back of everyone's mind. We're hoping to change that by turning this into something that is proactive, that makes it less threatening. The problem with a lot of the healthcare messaging and the way in which, the ads that you see in the paper about, this surgery or that robot or this medicine, it's all fear-based. It's built around, I can scan you in 20 seconds and I can detect heart blockages, but all of them have the subtle connotation of death behind it. It's not something that's designed to be more friendly, more proactive, or something that, what are the positive attributes of knowing what your health outcomes are?
Something that you look forward to.
People look forward to running a 5K or a 10K. People look forward to, in their 60s, being able to lift up their grandchildren without their back giving up. What do you look forward to? You look forward to being able to get up from a chair unassisted in your 70s. There is so much in life that people need to look forward to that good health can provide you. And so a lot of the messaging that we would build around this is oriented around that. Not so much on how fancy our scanners are or how good our medicines are or how quickly the doctor will see you. But there's a positivity around life and health. And that's something that we're hoping can help people go past the initial objection they have about just not wanting to know about the state of their heart or their bones.
To go back to Narayana Health and where we started the conversation, what does the group look like today in terms of its operations? What is its spread across India in terms of either hospitals or clinics?
We're in 21 locations across the country and one hospital in the Cayman Islands. We have all sorts of formats. We have huge hospitals in Bangalore and Calcutta, Delhi and Bombay. We have smaller, mid-sized hospitals, again in Bangalore. We have clinics in all our locations. We have pharmacies. But the format that we are eventually going to evolve to are a unit that runs these very large health city campuses in all the big cities of India, combined with much smaller format daycare surgery focused hospitals that you can quickly come in, get a surgery done, stay for a short period of time and go out, supplemented by a huge number of these clinics, diagnostic centers all across the city. And so we don't want to be more than 20 minutes from any single person in a city where we want to have an active presence in. All of that would be supplemented by this massive coordination layer, which is a combination of a call center, this CRM tool, which we've modified to call it the patient relationship manager, with apps and a massive software layer that keeps track. You had mentioned earlier about the GP being the repository of your family's medical history. It was impractical because no one person can keep track of so much. But for us, we would build a system around that. And so that's the thing we're spending a huge amount of time and effort on building the software layer of the entire hospital operating system, which is the ability for us to track every single patient in real time when they're in the hospital and out of the hospital, and be able to give them those helpful nudges and reminders that it's time for your checkup, or it's time to get this test done, or you may be out of this medicine and this is something we want to give to you.
What you've just said is something that I fully agree is lacking in the overall healthcare space, which is great software and great user experiences. It is also what I would expect, let's say, a startup if a startup were to try and enter the healthcare space with the desire or the intent to quote unquote disrupt it, they would not try to disrupt it by setting up hospitals and hiring doctors. They would try to disrupt it using the software layer and the user experience layer. For various reasons, it's also where hospitals are bad at traditionally, right? Forget software. And again, I'm not being specific to Narayan or any other one in particular, but most hospitals suck at the software experience. I mean, so much so that even the digital board outside, a doctor's room, which is supposed to show who's the next patient who's supposed to go in or who's currently inside, is often kind of out of service, etc. What does it take? I mean, from what you were saying, you're trying to build a software layer, an OS on top of all of this. How? I mean, I'm guessing this knowledge, this know-how does not exist in the overall hospital domain in India. How are you even doing it? How are you building it?
See, in the end, necessity being the mother of all invention, we're doing it because we had to do it. And now you brought up the startups and how if you start from a first principles basis and you say, this is how a system should run, logically, you would start with the software first. You would make a very good booking and a management system. You'd make a very good EMR, and then you would hire the doctors.
Sorry, what's an EMR?
EMR is electronic medical record. So that's just a
repository of all your
medical history and can track all of that. You'd start with that, and then you'd get doctors on board. But that's just not the natural evolution of things. For us, we reached a point where the volume of the work we were doing became too much that we were not able to manage with humans and paper and Excel files and emails. and so
So
on.
you're solving for efficiency.
Exactly. And in India, that's pretty much the only thing you can solve for, because every other cost bucket is out of your control. There was a point where we could, negotiate a little bit on the price of medicine, or we could try and beg and plead with the companies who are supplying us with things and say, please, we're dealing with poor people here, please give us a discount. But beyond a point, there is a diminishing returns aspect to it. And so we want to pay people really well. We want to get the best medicines. We want to get the best infrastructure. So what I pay for a brick is pretty much what everyone else pays for a brick. And what I pay for paracetamol is what everyone else pays for paracetamol. The only thing that's left is being able to be more efficient, reduce the number of manual transactions, and process more people through our system to lower cost for our customers. And the only thing that's left for us is efficiencies. And the only way you bring those efficiencies is by putting in automation, which is software. So we were brought into this through the natural evolution of our business. The bigger we grew, the less able we were to have an army of managers and receptionists and assistants to run around and do all these things, because people started to forget and things started to break down. And so we were initially reliant on a lot of third-party software developers to do that for us, but then we grew too big for their ability to handle us. And the largest software providers in the enterprise healthcare space simply weren't interested in building something so specialized for the way we operate, because you build something so finely tuned for how an Indian hospital operates, you can't sell it anywhere else. And so we were left with literally no choice other than to build our own hospital operating system. So we got a team together. We're fortunate to be in Bangalore, where there are a huge number of engineers and very talented developers who are interested enough in this space. And we said, look, this is the playground. This is the environment we're going to give you. This is how much volume we can do. We want the best of everything. And so we got a good team. We built the best software that we were able to get for us. And it turned out that when you combine that creativity and the freedom for them to operate in a system that gives them the latitude and immediate feedback from the doctors, from the patients, you end up building the best software. And so that's where we are right now.
No, I'm going to interrupt you again, because that's very important. Because most of the times, what I've seen is, having dealt with doctors as a patient, etc., the frustration that comes from, they've just installed this new software, and and they'll be doing something and saying like, this is so stupid, I can't do it. But the loop of feedback from the doctor to the software maker is broken, because typically the software is bought, mildly customized, installed, tested, etc. And at some point that relationship stops. The software maker is left, and now doctors have feedback, but there's no one left to fix that feedback because it's a different company. You're saying having the developers in the same organization as the doctors just creates a tighter feedback loop, because you can iterate your product much faster. To which the question would be, at some point, have you considered, is what you're building possibly something that can be spun out and offered to other organizations as well? Because if this need exists in India and you had it, I'm sure it exists for various other organizations as well.
It exists for every hospital out there. It exists for every hospital throughout the world. The problem is it's not easy to do. Such a thing does not exist right now. Our systems are inherently more conservative. Our volumes are simply not sufficient, in which it made sense for us to do it. But since our business model from day one was always predicated on using the existing infrastructure to its absolute breaking limit, that we were always a little bit ahead in terms of finding out ways in which things could be done more efficiently. So you cannot imagine a modern airline company without a software backend. You cannot imagine even a modern restaurant company without some sort of software backend, so that they're able to, deal with the delivery people and so on. A hospital is no different. And this is core to our business. This is not something that anyone else is going to come and say, look, you have this set of problems. I have the perfect set of solutions that are fit for you. For certain solutions, yes. For payment, it's a solved thing. We can get any number of plugins on payment. If it is about filing insurance claim, there are any number of solutions you can get for that. If it's for, let's say, just radiology imaging, the people who can do that. But no one is tying all of that together, which is payment for the image, for the appointment, for the doctor showing up at that certain time with the AI enabled interpretation along with that. Right? To wrap all of those things up into one offering, it's something that hospitals throughout the world are realizing that this is a need for them. And we're so lucky to be living through this age where now a lot of these tools are so freely available, where every organization is essentially becoming not just their own software developer, they're even getting into AI development because the tools are relatively low code. So it behooves any modern corporation to say that, look, there's nothing that's distinct in terms of developing software for our process. This is our process. And so we can simplify it by using what's out there.
What this looks to me is that the organizations, the healthcare organizations, what it takes to succeed is no longer having hospitals and doctors. Yes, that's a necessary but not sufficient condition. You must have hospitals, you must have doctors, etc. But if you're trying to do an integrated play, if you're trying to do a longer term relationship play, if you're trying to connect the pieces together, the focus shifts from hardware to software. Hardware being hospitals, MRI machines, clinics, land, software being, of course, the patient experience, the software that connects all of this together. So I'll go back to a question I had asked earlier. What does it take to succeed in this ambitious play? Would it be fair to say that software chops and the ability to imagine, architect, build, iterate great software experiences is one of the key factors?
I mean, that's the not a key factor. It's more of the raw ingredients, what you need to do that. I think in the end, the organization needs to be built around singular purpose and vision. And you look at what are the means by which you achieve that vision. And so our goal is to make people healthy, to make healthcare affordable and accessible to large numbers of people. And the way in which we want to achieve that is through building a system integrated with software that deals with the entire life cycle. There are other organizations that you'll read about in the business press who will achieve that through deploying huge amounts of private equity capital and acquiring a large number of hospital beds, or buying up a large number of business practices and combining them and merging them together. That is still a good enough strategy. It's still a way to reach large numbers of people. But we're oriented a little differently in that because it's a little bit of a point of differentiation for us. Like, we never wanted to follow in the footsteps of what already exists because we know the path to what already exists and where that leads you. You invest in infrastructure, you invest in beds, you invest in very expensive acquisitions. All those are embedded costs. And those costs have to be passed down to your customer eventually. And that will lead to all the complaints that come about healthcare being expensive. If we were to say that, healthcare costs can come down. The inefficiencies in a system can come down. The amount of waiting, you don't need to wait in a hospital. You don't need to clear any bills in a hospital. If we say that all those are inefficiencies that can be taken away, then it's not defined by beds. It's defined by processes, it's defined by manual systems, it's defined by paper printouts, it's defined by queues. And so you reframe the thing that you are building. And the thing that we are building becomes a system for being able to treat people. And not just a mad acquisition of large numbers of beds throughout the country.
What Narayana Health, Hrudalaya originally, and of course Health now, started out with and is known for fundamentally is surgeries. High quality, low cost surgeries. There have been attempts to disrupt that space as well, including by venture funded companies as well, that are trying to aggregate surgeries. Because surgeries, again, like you said earlier, is a transactional thing. When someone wants a surgery, they have no affinity to a doctor or a clinic. It's like whoever provides me with what I consider an acceptable level of quality at the best possible price, I might get it from them, of course, right? How have you observed this disruption? And I think one of the examples, if I may use, is that Pristin Healthcare. I'm not asking you to comment on Pristin, but there are others as well who are trying to aggregate, bring people together, and provide them with an experience where an organization will say, look, we're not a hospital, but we'll just bring the doctors and we'll provide the surgery and we'll give you an experience. How has the space of surgeries evolved in the last 5 to 10 years? And where do you see that going over the next couple of years or whatever, 5, 10 years?
Sure. A while back, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, this was post-pandemic. And during the pandemic, we were just hyper-focused and hyper-vigilant around infection control because, people were sick, they were coming in, and we just had an inordinate amount of focus looking at all the different sources of bacterial viral infection in our hospitals. We started noticing in the ICUs, there were patients that were getting infected with a certain kind of drug-resistant bacteria. And we have a large infection control team. What they do is they start isolating. They start, walling people off, and they're trying to figure, okay, what did I do for this group of people? What did I do for this other group of people? And we narrowed it down to the IV and the potassium salts that we were giving to the patient. And then we thought maybe there's some contamination at our store level. And we, just thoroughly disinfected, cleared out the stores, and we realized that, this it's not coming from us. Then we bought new samples of the IV bag, and then we tested it, and then we found that actually the so-called sterile liquid is contaminated at the source, which it seems just impossible for us to believe that something that is sold to us as a sterile product has a bacterial infection. Like, we don't even hear about these things in doctors who are trained in the Western environments. Then we went all the way up to the manufacturer. And then we spoke to them, and we realized that their manufacturing processes were pretty shoddy because of the price controls that were put in. They were just not able to maintain the standards that we wanted. So we found some other manufacturer who was exporting, but was willing to, sell these products to us, provided we guaranteed him a huge amount of volume, which we did. And we thought, that's it. We've cracked the code for solving infection control in this country. And then we went to all the other hospital groups and we shared our findings with them. We said, look, this is the problem, but if you join with us, if we go to these manufacturers, we can solve this. And we can prepay for large amounts of volume, and you can cut down the infection in your hospitals. And no one was interested. Absolutely no one was interested, because they don't think enough about their business to go to that level of granular detail. So, to the question that you had asked earlier about, how is it that
disruption, surgeries, venture funded startups trying to kind of, change the way things are done?
So our operations are so focused on getting to the absolute last mile, to go through every single point of the supply chain till we went all the way to the manufacturer's factory to figure out that this is where this contamination is coming from. We initially could not fathom the idea that you could be doing very relatively complex surgeries in rented premises without any sort of infection control standards put in, without things that we take for granted like sterile corridors, air conditions with this thing called laminar flow, HEPA filters that screen the, we couldn't imagine that people would willingly, I would not send any of my family members to an unorganized hospital for getting a major surgery done. But a lot of people have written about that, and that's where 90% of the surgeries happen in this country, and the results are fine because these are relatively low acuity surgeries. The odds of infection are very small, and you offer something at a price that most people can afford. So we went past that. We said, fine, you know what? You can dismiss it for the fact that there are no very high in infection standards, but that's, first world snobbish thinking coming from a chain like us, because, we can't sit on our high horse and say that, we have to be doing things at the absolute highest standard. But looking past that, the most important signal that startups in the surgery space gave us is that they tell us immediately that this is what customers prefer. They prefer an experience where everything is pre-planned, where it's prepaid, where it's one very transparent bill, where they quickly come in on the day of the surgery and they quickly leave on the day of the discharge, with no complication, with no hassle, everything on an app, everything cashless, everything coordinated online in a way that we were not doing. And so companies like this were absolutely kicking our backsides in the customer service part, which customers value a lot more. And the things that no one can really perceive, which is ICU infection, which we inordinately focus on.
Maybe it's what you. So this is very interesting, right? You as a hospital group or as a doctor value things which you think are more important than what consumers value. So either you're not communicating the importance of these things to consumers enough, or consumers really don't care. They're like, it's an operation, it's an operation. Predictability, and all of these other things are what they believe in. So it's very interesting, right? Just like same thing, but two different sets of things that value to both sides.
You can do both, right? And to come back to Apple, which you spoke about, there was this story from the Steve Jobs biography where his father, who was an amateur carpenter, would polish the back of the drawer. And, Steve Jobs said, why would you do that? No one can see it. And his father said, look, I'll know it. Similarly, when the first iPhones came.
I have a similar story to narrate. Less interesting than Steve Jobs is when we set up our Christmas tree, and I asked our 13-year-old son, and my wife asked him to put up the decorations, and he said, I'll put them right in the part which faces the door and nothing behind. I said, no, you got to put it all around. Well, that's the point, right? He's like, who's going to see it? I said, we'll know.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you with that.
And similarly, when the new iPhone came out and they wanted to test the tolerances, and Steve Jobs just saying, make it thinner, make it thinner, make it thinner. And they said, this is as thin as we can go, Steve. And he dumped the iPhone in water and bubbles started coming out. And he said, look, there's a space, bring it down. So you can do both. You can have a fanatic level of attention to details that a customer will never perceive, but they will know. Because, so in the case of iPhones, they last much longer than the alternatives. And you can also get this very friendly customer-facing thing, because it's honestly a lot harder for us to fix supply chain problems than it is to just put a much more responsive call center. It's a lot easier for us to do that. And so it gave us a customer signal that we were inordinately focused on things customers don't value. They do value the infection control. They value the thing that we provide. But as large organizations, we burden our customers so much with our own bullshit, with the number of forms that we have to make them fill, with the hassle with the parking, with the huge crowds they have to face whenever they get to us. That's on us. That's on all large hospital groups like ours to fix that, because the customer is giving us a signal that they would rather risk certain infection going to someone smaller and maybe not as adherent to infection control protocols, rather than deal with the nonsense of this huge waiting area, huge registration counters,
How
huge
do you
billing
fix
counters.
that? Because it's true. There are things that, I want to do small things like, get a test done, etc. and all that. And the reason I keep putting it off in my head is because I'm picturing, I'm exactly all the things that you said. Then I'm picturing the parking, then the entry, then like getting a token, then waiting, and then being told that the doctor is out for rounds or that emergency surgery came in, then spending a couple of hours. And I'm like, I keep putting it off saying, when do I have 2-3 hours to spare? When do I have 2-3 hours to spare? And it turns out not for months.
Yep.
How do you fix it? Is it different spaces?
No, I mean, it is all, how you fix it is first by understanding that it is fixable. It is fixed in McDonald's, where either you go stand in queue and give the manual order, or they have those massive touch screens and you order the thing beforehand and you pick it up. It is fixed in the Indian passport office, where you come in exactly 15 minutes before your appointment, you rush through counter 1, counter 2, counter 3, counter 4, payment, out.
That's a great example.
And
I'm old enough to have seen the evolution of the Indian passport office from what it used to be earlier to the efficiency-driven organization it is now.
And that's the thing that, as leaders, we, try and tell everyone that it's not impossible to take care of. If even the Indian passport office has figured this out, there's no reason for us not to do it. And so, I start by giving a set of very unreasonable targets. So last year we had a 0 paper goal. So no more paper. Why paper? It's not because you just want to hit an ESG goal, which we sort of want to do also, but Paper represents everything that it is about data flowing and getting stuck. Paper is not intelligent. Paper takes time to print. I mean, apart from the fact that it cuts trees, paper is a dead end of information. So information goes to die. Now, I said every piece of information being conveyed has to be intelligent. And so that's much more difficult to articulate. So you put a broad goal and say no more paper. The next one, no more waiting areas, no more places for people to sit. When someone comes in and you know that the queue is going to be long, so people, the immediate response is, okay, let's make lounges, let's make comfortable cushions, let's build much more waiting area. It doesn't solve the problem. No one wants to be in a hospital. No one wants to spend hours here. It doesn't matter how good and comfortable the couch is. It doesn't matter how good the coffee is, how ambient the temperature is.
It only makes people more tense because they're wondering there's so many people sitting in this lounge. What's my number? Is that person getting in ahead of me, etc. and all that.
Exactly. So take away the couches. Every quarter, there are going to be fewer couches in our hospital than there were the quarter
musical
before.
chairs, isn't it?
It's musical chairs. And so what that does, it then forces us to say, okay, fine. If there's less place to sit, I need to be much better about scheduling. If I've told you 9, but the technician shows up at 9:30, that's not acceptable. Or if I know that I'm going to have to deal with 20 people within this 1 hour span, then we need to have adequate resources to be able to deal with that. So putting the constraint on us, making people's lives hell initially, but in the long run, forcing us to be able to improve the services till we get to that point. So going all the way back to the point about startups, they give us very important customer signals. And this is what customers prefer. And it's something that we can solve for. It's not impossible. It may not be the highest priority, because obviously the highest priority is to make huge amounts of profits, to do a lot of acquisitions, to show up on newspapers as the number one provider of this and that. Those things can still happen, but these things, the bathrooms will not clean themselves. The bill will not be generated by itself. Someone needs to actively push that and to make sure that these little things are taken care of, which will lead to all the other things that I mentioned.
Thank you for listening to First Principles, the weekly leadership podcast from the Ken's newsroom. We also have a weekly companion newsletter, also called First Principles. In it, I expand upon many of the themes you hear on the podcast, like mental models, learning, and self-reflection. But the First Principles newsletter goes much further. A vibrant and diverse community of readers and listeners send in recommendations each week for books, articles, music, and habits. And of course, evocative Silent Sunday photographs that they've taken all over the world. You can sign up for free at theken.com/newsletters/first-principles. The link is also in our show notes for your convenience. Lastly, if you like First Principles, do consider rating us on your favorite podcast platform. We'd love that. And if you leave us a comment with your feedback, we'd love you even more. This episode was hosted by me, Rohin Dharmakumar, and produced by my colleague Anushka Mukherjee. The audio editing is by Rajiv CN, our resident audio engineer. See you next Thursday.